Greetings Terrarians, Khaios here. Before I jump into today's video, I wanted to quickly announce that I have launched a Patreon account. Due to some drastic and sudden changes in my life, I will be having to move from Japan back to the United States at the beginning of November, and I'll be needing to find a stable source of income. I've been encouraged to launch a Patreon account to help me get me on my feet sooner. I do plan on creating videos for the foreseeable future either way, but if you would like to help support the channel, you can find a link in the description below. A massive thanks to anyone who chooses to take a look, but even if you don't, I cannot express how much I truly appreciate you just watching these videos and leaving a like or comment. Also, the channel has some new amazing art thanks to the very talented artist named Spooklies. I absolutely love it, and I hope you do too. She's currently taking commissions, so if you're looking to have some custom art made, I'll leave her info in the description. So, a couple of weeks ago, I built a commenter suggestion for boss-themed houses, but there wasn't enough time for me to complete them all, so I just did pre-hardmode bosses. I asked you all if you'd like to see more in the future, and the answer was a resounding yes. If you haven't seen that video yet, there is a link to it in the description below, and to make up for a mistake that I made in the last video, I'm going to start off by finishing up the early game bosses by introducing the one that I forgot, the Queen Bee. And here it is. So I wanted to go with a kind of different route, again with all of these houses, than something I would normally do, which might be like a beehive or something of that nature. So I wanted to make a gigantic bee sitting on top of a rosebud that hasn't bloomed, because I couldn't really build a rose that had been opened up in a 2D game, at least from this perspective, and at least not with my skill. And so the rosebud has been closed up and the gigantic bee is sitting on top, and then we have a house coming out of the bottom of it. So for the bee itself, I have a bunch of different blocks here. As you can see by my bounciness, there's some silly balloon here that's been painted gray for its wing, with some yellow stained glass that's also been painted gray. And then for the bee itself, I decided to use leaf blocks because I figured that bees kind of look a little fuzzy, and it wouldn't look natural to me to use something like more silly balloon that's perfectly smooth. I just wanted to make it look a little bit rougher and a little bit fuzzier. So I have some deep yellow and deep orange painted leaf and jungle leaf block. And then for the eye, I have some black painted hive block, just because it kind of gives that hexagonal eye shape that you see in most insects. And then for the background parts of the bee, the black stripes and the underside and whatnot, we have some silly balloon wall that's been painted black as well. I believe the balloon is green. For the rose itself, we have some deep red painted hardened sand and some deep red painted marble, which is kind of the lighter shade over here. And in between the gaps between the two, because I didn't want it to be blocky, so I sloped everything, I have some deep red painted leaf wall, a living leaf wall specifically. Then with some deep lime paint, I combined some living wood with some living mahogany and just created the stem of the rose. And then out towards the bottom of it, I created a branch that's coming out to the side with some leaves on top and the house inside with some wood and ebonwood painted brown, and just a kind of overall combination of a simple house with an elegant flower and a giant bee. I have no idea what the mechanic is doing up there, but we are on to the next build. So after the wall of flesh, obviously we're going to move on to the mechanical bosses. And I built the mechanical bosses in order of ideas. Basically, whatever came to me first, I built it. So the first one, as you can see here, is Skeletron Prime, which I'm pretty happy with overall. I decided to make kind of a, I guess, workshop area on where the mechanic might be building Skeletron Prime, because according to the new lore that's been released for Terraria, the mechanic is behind the creation of the mechanical bosses. So here we have a lot of tin and copper plating that's been painted gray. It's not only the metal accents for the support beams, but obviously it's the two arm bits and the skull for Skeletron Prime. I decided not to do the actual lengthy arm segments, and the other two, the saw and the shooter parts as well, because I wanted to make it look like this was only partially completed. And then I have gigantic chains here, which I've covered in a few different videos as well. The only difference between those ones and this one is the bottom link here is not a block, it's actually a fence. That way I could sit it behind the skull and the arm attachments rather than have it collide, because these are half blocks right here. You can see if I hammer this 5 times, it comes up to a full block, and hammer it again, it comes down to a half. So in order for me to actually have the chain connect to the arm bits and to the head, which are also half blocks right here, I had to use fences, which is just a rich mahogany fence painted gray, rather than the rich mahogany block for the chain link itself. And then obviously I have some more shade wood and rich mahogany fence painted brown for the support beams, and then just some living wood for the cross beams. This hook here is pretty fun. I've seen a lot of people use this technique, and I've done it a couple times myself, but not too often. But this right here is a lantern that's the flesh lantern, been painted gray. It looks a lot like a hook when it's been painted gray. And then on top of that is just a tin plating block painted gray, chain, and then we have this nice looking wooden and steel crane right here. And then the house itself is fairly simple, with some spooky wood painted brown for the roof. And these little bits here, these rivets that you see, are just the tops of lead fences that have been painted white, just so that they can better match the color of all of the metal that I have going around. And then this great area down here, as well as on the inside, is Purple Rain wallpaper that's been painted gray. And that's pretty much all there is to this build. Next up, I took on the Destroyer. So I started that off by going up here into the sky and building the 3 segments of the Destroyer, just kind of so I could see what I wanted to do and how it would look, and I'm kind of pleased with how it looks. So obviously we have the tail segment, the head segment, and I'm facing it this direction for a particular reason, and then the body segments, which obviously there'd be multiple of these just chained together. Now, this Destroyer is clearly massive, way bigger than the original one, but I wanted a fair bit of detail to go into this build. And what I wanted to do with this build was make it look like the Destroyer had been killed, and then the player had, or I guess the NPC that moves in, had assembled a house using the fragments of the remains of the Destroyer. So down here, I took the concepts that I built up above, and I applied them. So we have the head over here, and then we have the tail segment down here, it just kind of trails off into the floor, and a body segment right up here on top of the roof with some wooden support beams. And the reason why I went for a wooden interior is just because with the same concept with Skeletron Prime, it just adds a lot more variety to it. I tried to do Skeletron Prime with an indoor of a kind of industrial looking factory, and it's just far too gray. So all of these wooden accents look really good with the gray. So again, same with Skeletron Prime, we have a lot of tin and copper plating painted gray. All of the eye segments, these red glowing bits, are deep red painted silly balloon with some deep red painted ruby gem spark to actually make them glow. And then we have some dynasty wood for the floor and the ceiling, which is also providing the support beams, and the cross segments are just more living wood. And the furniture, I decided to go with meteorite because it kind of mimics the probes that would come off of the Destroyer, and I figured that it might look like you kind of converted the probes into some light sources and a chest. From there, I thought about how I wanted to do the twins, and I already had 2 heavily mechanical themed builds, and I had considered doing another one where you made houses out of the remains of the twins, but it was just feeling a little too repetitive for me. So since they're giant eyeballs, I thought it might be fun to make a haunted house out of them and just have them coming out of the sides of the house. And so we have one at the top and one at the corner. And we just have a spooky haunted house here. I have not done a tutorial yet on how to build this style of house, but October is right around the corner and it is a tutorial that I'm planning to do, so keep an eye out for that. But for the most part, I'm going to go over the materials. So we have red and blue Dynasty shingles up here. Some have been painted gray, some have been painted lime, and they've been alternating so we get these hard lines in between them rather than them blending together. And then we have some more Palladium column with some Ebonstone brick to create this side brick pattern, which I have covered in my medieval tutorial builds. This pillar right here, however, is just a Palladium column with some living mahogany wood, and they've both been painted white and actuated. I think it makes for a really interesting looking pillar design. It also looks really good in wood if you replace the Palladium with, say, living wood. The eyes are the same that I did in the previous video, so they're mostly silly balloon that's been painted so they're colorful like the eyes. So we have the red one and the green one. I always forget which one's which because I'm bad at Terraria and I rarely kill bosses, and so I don't remember the twins' names. Yeah. Any rate, the background walls within this build are green tiled walls, or no, they're green slab walls with some green tiled walls around the windows, and all of that's been painted gray. The horizontal support beams are brown painted rich mahogany, while the vertical ones are brown painted shade wood. The floor is spooky wood because it's spooky, and because I like it to look a little bit more older and run down. And then for the foundation, we have some white painted blue tiled wall with some gray painted rich mahogany fence. The next boss will be Plantera, but she's also going to be the last boss for today. This video took around 15 hours to complete, and adding 4 more bosses on top of that was just not a realistic option. So if you're wondering if I'm going to be doing the last 4 bosses, the answer is absolutely yes. There will be a part 3 to this, but for now, let's take a look at Plantera. I wanted to go for a really jungle theme and something I've never really built before. It's very rare that I work with lizard brick in general, and I think the only time I've ever done it on the channel was when I was collaborating with Cheesy Panini and trying to just build off of techniques that I've never really used before. So here we have some white painted lizard brick with some white painted Dynasty wood accents for the floor and ceiling, and then we just have overgrowth everywhere. Some lime painted living leaf wall, which looks really good against any of the jungle textures. And I have a lot of mud with some jungle grass growing out of it, and these vines took forever to grow. In fact, I just went AFK for a couple of hours to let them do their own thing. The strange plants have been painted lime as well, just to add a splash of color. And then all of these interesting jungle plants thankfully grow naturally. I didn't know any of the ones down here within the false foundation would grow, but they actually do. Most grasses don't grow in front of walls, so I'm surprised to learn that jungle grasses do. So I guess you learn something every day, even if you've been building for the past 6 years like I have. So the pillars are Palladium column painted gray, and then we have some rich mahogany fence painted gray. And then as far as the background walls go, we have some white painted hellstone brick for all of the crumbling segments. And then the majority of the walls here are going to be gray painted pink dungeon brick, just because the lizard brick wall is just far too dark for my tastes. Even when painted white, it was just far too dark. And I thought that the pink dungeon brick wall was a really, really nice match. And that's going to do it for today. We've now covered 11 different bosses for these custom themed houses. If you would like to check them out for yourself in game, you can find a link in the description below. I hope you enjoyed the builds. Again, I just wanted to thank anybody that chooses to help support the channel by checking out my Patreon page, and a massive thank you to everyone for watching these videos in general, especially if you made it this far. Thank you all very much for watching. Check back next week for part 3 of boss themed houses. I'll catch y'all later. Happy building.